60-40. If you look at the Lena versus mailer race recently, it was 57 votes went to mailer, right, and 43 went to Hidalgo. So we're about a 60-40 district across Cy-Fair, okay? Which typically means if more Republicans run in a school board race, because it's a plurality election, right, you don't need a majority to win. You just need to get the most votes. See what I'm saying? So, and that's, you know, we learned that prior to 2021. You know, the incumbents, they would organize around a pack of incumbents were nearly, some of them almost 20 years, 16 years, they've been our school board, right? And it slowly, if you guys have been following any of that stuff, it slowly deteriorated into kind of woke content, right? In terms of CRT, in terms of the books that we see, in terms of gender affirmation to our children without the parents' consent. These kinds of things that the parents have done a lot of work, and some of the school board members or candidates have done a lot of work to find these things out in our schools. And we pushed some of those things into legislation down in Austin. So to prevent this, so ideally what we really need to do, and this is in the Republican platform, we need to get this election on the normal election cycle, right? I mean, these elections, some elections in the last 12 years, we've had 4%, the low ones, 4% turnout in a school board election. And these are the parents, these folks are setting the policies, you know, to govern, you know, student achievement ideally in our district. So on the high end, we've had, you know, in 2021, on average was 17% turnout in precincts we targeted. So we blew out the 3 candidates in 2021, okay? Now, yes, now one of those races you guys remember was contested, right? We had 2 really good candidates, Lassigame who won, Courtney Spradley announced early, she's a formidable candidate, got a lot of votes. There was 2 more, Grace Horner and Tyler LeCompte ran in that race, so we split a lot of votes. Does anyone know the margin that we beat John Ogletree? 800 votes. Wow. If we lost that election, I assure you, Ogletree would be the president of the school board. He would have had the votes, okay? So we learned from that experience, because unfortunately the precinct chairs out here in the district, they typically don't organize behind these elections because they're nonpartisan, right? So what we tried to do last time is get organized and try to encourage the candidates based on feedback from the chair. So we've been doing this for about 6 months now, right? Trying to recruit candidates, right? And do a forum with the precinct chair. So there's 130 precincts in Cy-Fair ISD, of which I think we've got close to 86 that have a precinct chair. So a precinct chair is meant to be the kind of the Republican leader, organizer in that precinct. And so we've held forums, we've asked them questions about the platform, about conservative values, about their world views, and we've given them feedback. We have no power, no authority to tell any candidate not to run. You cannot stop that. What we've asked them to do is take a pledge and encourage them to consider, once you get this feedback, right, consider if you need the party's endorsement, if you need the work of the folks that are willing to go out and knock on doors for you and write handwritten envelopes and send out mailers, if you need that kind of support, helping raising money, do meet and greets, etc. If you need that help, right, but you're not in the top 4, because this November there's 4 more. We want all 4, right? Of those 4, only 1's coming back that we know of, right? Julie Heineman is going to run again. The other 3, as best we can tell, are not. That could change, but believe me, a lot will change between now and the end of August. So the registration opens for candidates this Saturday. Okay, so I'm guessing they probably won't have anyone at the admin building on Saturday, so officially it'll be Monday, but by law it's on Saturday. They might be able to submit it in email, I don't know. And it's about a month. It goes through the middle of August that the registration of candidates can apply. Then after that, when registration stops, they have, I think, about a week, 7 to 10 days, any candidate in there basically could see who's in your race, who you run against, you could step down. So one of the forums we did in 2021, that happened. So some candidates that were registered that we were not aware of, they came to a forum that we held, and based on the competition, and them understanding, if we split the vote in this race, we're giving the seat to the Democrat. So they stepped down. So that's what we've tried to do. We have, again, I want to emphasize, You know, we as precinct chairs we want the whole community to weigh in on this, but there is no primary. There is no runoff, right? So this is the best kind of thing that we could come up with to try to give candidates feedback and say, look, so we ended up having 8 candidates, right, through the forums, and 4 came out on top. The number 4 was pretty close to number 5. So we were asked those 2 to kind of talk amongst each other and see who may want to continue. So every one of them, all 8 candidates took a pledge that says, look, based on this feedback, if we don't have the support for the chairs, we will consider not running, right? That's not playing out very well for us right now, but that's their candidates. They make the decision. So with that said, that background, I'd like to, so George is one of the candidates. He's got the flyers handed out. I'd like to give him the floor. George, you can take your time, Todd's time, and Justin's time, and no. But I filled in some slots for election integrity if we have time to do that, and if you guys are interested. Thanks, George.
Thank you all. I feel like I know most people in this crowd. My wife told me to dress this way tonight because she said, you're on the agenda, so you need to look a little different than you normally look. So that's why I have the towel tonight. First, my name is George Edwards Jr., for those who don't know me. As many of you do, I'm usually here on the 3rd Thursday with the Tea Party meeting and introducing the speakers and kind of going through the agenda. First, I want to humbly ask for your vote. Now I would like to discuss my qualifications to run for the school board. I have passed out a flyer that outlines many of the qualifications that I have, but I'd like to go through some specifically for those who didn't either get the flyer or may not understand some of the qualifications that are in the flyer. I'm a certified public accountant. I was employed with ExxonMobil for 39 years before retiring in January 2020. I'm a former Cy-Fair ISD school board member, having served as vice president of the board from 1995 to 1998. After serving on the Cy-Fair ISD school board, I was appointed to serve on the State Bar of Texas Board of Directors by the State Supreme Court for the period of 1999 through the year 2002. I served as chair of Leadership Houston, Class 21, from 2002 to 2003. After serving on the State Bar Board of Directors, State Bar of Texas Board of Directors, I was appointed by the State Supreme Court to serve on the Commission for Lawyer Discipline from 2003 to 2009. In the local community, I have served on the Chancellor's Advisory Committee for Lone Star College as a trustee on the Nye-House Education Center for Literacy and chair of Nye-House's Finance Committee. And I served as chair of the Board of Directors of Energy Capital Credit Union, as a deacon at Second Baptist Church, and as a member of the Cy-Fair ISD Community Leadership Committee. My reason for running for Cy-Fair ISD board: I strongly believe that every student should be able to read for comprehension by the end of 3rd grade. My platform consists of 3 elements: focus on reading, writing, and math skills. I want to help dispel the myth that economically disadvantaged students cannot learn. As a former poor child, I can attest that reading for comprehension by the end of 3rd grade and high expectations leads to an opportunity to live the American dream. Number 2, I want to re-engage with parents, churches, and businesses in the community. Bring them back into the schools. Number 3, address discipline issues head on. set a standard of high expectation for academics and behavior of students, ensure a rigorous academic curriculum at each grade level. Trying to get in the flavor here of what my agenda is. Challenges facing Cy-Fair ISD. The number one challenge is hiring a superintendent who will execute the vision and policies of a majority of school board. Number two challenge, ensuring our students are reading for comprehension by the end of third grade, using phonics as the only method of teaching.
Ooh, yes.
Number three, maintaining a focus on academic preparation for all students. And number four, ensuring our teachers are adequately compensated for the jobs that they do in the classroom. So how can you help? Number one, make a financial contribution to my campaign. Number two, host a meet and greet for me. Number three, encourage your friends and neighbors to support and vote for me in this election. Number four, assist the campaign by making phone calls or block walking in your neighborhood. Finally, we can all make a difference in getting our school district refocused on what is best for students. That is to academically prepare them for success in society. Thank you for your support and your vote. Thank you.
Questions?
So George, you raised the question of discipline in the schools, and from everything I've seen in various school districts, what they're doing, their hands are tied behind their back. So how do we do that? How do we increase the discipline and get the students committed to it?
Okay. First off, our school district has a code of conduct. One of the things that we did when I formerly served on the school board, at the beginning of the school year, every school, and the opening of that school, when we invited the parents and the students to come in at the very outset, the administration of that school would take the parents into the auditorium or the gym, and they would go over the expectations that the principal and administration had for that school. One of those expectations was that all parents needed to be aware of the code of conduct. They were encouraged to read it. They were told that discipline issues with disruption and that type of thing would not be tolerated in the schools. They were told from the very outset that what the expectations were for that school, and they would be held accountable. The students would be held accountable. They wanted the parents to hold the students accountable for the discipline disruptions and things that occurred. We did that every year during the time I was on the board. The other thing I think that we're missing, we had a more rigorous curriculum in our schools than we do. When I say rigorous curriculum, we had students, we had teachers that taught the reading, the math, the sciences, and the history, and students had homework. They would have to do homework and bring homework, do homework and bring it to class the next day. If a student is busy doing their schoolwork, they have little time for discipline problems. Now, does that erase all discipline problems? Probably not. You're gonna have one or two little Johnnies or Susies that will act out, but the majority of kids we found all conform to those standards. But the key thing is setting high expectation standards in the school. And I think you'll minimize the discipline issues that you see. You won't get them 100%, but you'll minimize it. Yes, sir.
You said you're on the school board before, right?
Yes, sir. 95,
Was
98.
Was Ogletree there then?
No.
Do you know him or?
I know him. Yes, I do.
Well, I worked in the last school board election, I went to a lot of doors. After I found out a lot of his philosophies and theories when I saw his social postings. I mean, I thought he was like anti-American from what I saw. Were you aware of that stuff, or did you know about him?
I wasn't aware of it until it was brought to my attention. I did not know he was posting what he was posting.
Did you
It
see
was
it?
brought to I saw parts of it, yes I did. I was not pleased with it. I shared that sentiment with him because I didn't think it was necessary, and I thought it was divisive. And so he heard that from me, and
So you voted against him?
well, I didn't support it, just put it that way.
Okay.
I knew we want people on the school board who are not divisive. We want people who are looking out for the interests of all our students, all our parents, all our constituents. And to me, that message did not, what he was posting did not send that message. And so that disturbed me. I was off base with that, and I let him know that. I didn't think it was appropriate. Yes, sir.
Let's pretend for a minute that a miracle occurs and we go to school vouchers. Okay, and now people can choose what schools they want to support. What transformation do you think Cy-Fair ISD ought to make to accommodate that? And if there's a transformation to make, why would you wait?
Good question. A lot of talk about school choice. To be honest, I like the idea of school choice. I truly do. But let me tell you something. I think Cy-Fair ISD, and I know that, having the experience, can provide one of the best educations that money can buy anywhere. I think if the focus is returned to academics like it was at one time, then most people will choose Cy-Fair ISD. Most people chose Cy-Fair ISD to move out here. And so those of us who have been here for a while, we know, historically, what the district has been able to accomplish academically. Most people are wanting to move their kids because they want them to get a better education, and they're not pleased with what they're seeing in public school. If we change that, and I say we, school board, mainly the superintendent and the community change that, then I believe more people are going to choose Cy-Fair. Now, like I say, like if a person wants to go to a private school or any other school, or charter school or whatever, that's strictly their choice, and that's fine. But if I had my choices, it would be Cy-Fair ISD because I know the type of education and curriculum that they provide, and we need to get back to that. We've moved away, and that's the problem that I see.
Other questions? Great.
Oh,
Yeah, George, Craig Cameron, appreciate your running. Glad that you're running for school board. Say, I had a young set of parents talk to me this week. They said that their daughter goes to Jersey Village High School, and last year some of the teachers were pushing this transgender agenda, wanting to know what the kids' pronouns were and things like that. How can we stop being the channel for the transgender agenda in our public schools?
good question. First of all, we need to get a good, sound school board in place. And secondly, you need to get a superintendent, hire a superintendent who will carry out the vision and policies of that school board. That's how we would manage that. It can be managed. I believe personally, and it's been a disappointment to me, which is one of the things that's motivating me, is that I know Cy-Fair has moved off the needle in terms of what it can do. And we've gotten more into those other areas that are distractions from education of our young people. And we need to refocus and get it back to that. But a strong school board and a superintendent can manage those issues. Yes.
So, speaking of the superintendent,
Okay.
if I understand right, in the credit system, the teachers have to earn a certain number of credits every couple of years. One of the ways they could do that was by joining the superintendent's book club. And I'm told that the majority of books on that push the LGBTQ agenda from our supervisor in our district under the table to the teachers so that nobody even knew that that was happening. So we're getting a new superintendent, and the timing of that is that the new one will start November 1st, and you will get voted on within the week. And so the question is, how do you manage a superintendent that they have put in that may or may not have our values at heart?
Very good question. First of all, that's a very good question, and I know that process is going on, and I'm very disappointed that the current school board would even entertain that at this time. But we could deal with that. If we get an elected board of new members, that wasn't the superintendent that board selected. And so we don't have to keep that superintendent. We can fire that superintendent and bring in and do a selection process for our own superintendent. And I suspect if this board continues with that process, that's probably what will happen. You do not want to, I am very disappointed that this board would even try to do something like that. The board has to select its superintendent to work with. I suspect this person, whoever they select, will come in not with a majority vote. I'm thinking, I hope not, because that sends a message to the community that he was not the choice of the total board. You need a superintendent that's got a majority support of the board. And really a unanimous support. Every superintendent that I have seen that goes into a school district, every member has supported them. And if this one comes in, I suspect he won't have that, and he's gonna be suspect from day one. And the new board members, it's not our superintendent. We don't have to stick with it. We can move on and get another superintendent. We just have to go through that selection process again.
Yeah, to be clear, this is intentional.
Yes.
Right, they know there's 4 on the last 3, they know there's 4 coming up, we only need 1. Right, so they are accelerating the replacement of Mark Henry before this election, so the voice of the community can't be heard.
Thank you. George, first of all, thank you for your service. Let's go back to kind of the DEI and CRT and all that stuff.
Sure.
And how do we get rid of that? My concern is there's a lot of money behind those causes, let's say, right? And I don't know if it's coming down to the school district or whatever, right? How do we get away from that? Even if we have to turn down money so that we can say we're not doing this stuff.
Well, first of all, if you paid attention to the state legislature this past session, they have helped to eliminate or remove a lot of that from the local school system. They've had bills that were passed this past spring that outlawed those things in the colleges and even in school districts themselves. Let me tell you something about DEI and CRT. One of the things we've got to keep our eye on, keep focused on, if we educate our students, we teach them the basics of what they need to know to be successful in the society. You don't need the DEIs and the CRTs. You will find that our society would be better off. And one of the things that bothers me about some of the proponents that are pushing this is that they're not solid on trying to get kids educated. They just want to push an agenda and divide and set people against each other. I don't like that. We don't have to do that. We need to stick with what schools are intended to do, and that is to educate our students with what they need. And they need reading, writing, and math skills
Yeah.
that were just as valid 100 years ago. They're still valid today. Our employers, society in general, need educated students who can produce and take on the roles that they desire to take on in society. We need that, and that's what the focus should be. Sir,
Okay, thank you.
I mean, ma'am.
What about trade schools? Are they gonna try, is there any way to bring those back?
Good question. One of the things you gotta do, realize in this day and time, that's why the basics are still, reading, writing, and math is valid wherever direction you decide to go as a student. If you wanna go to college, you need reading, writing, and math skills. You wanna be a tradesperson, a tradesman, you need to be able to read, you need to be able to write. You wanna go to the military, you need to be able to read, you need to be able to write. You need those skills, whichever direction you go into. And the employers and the military and the trade associations, they're begging school systems to produce students with those basic skills. Because if they have those basic skills, they can build on the training that they need those students to accomplish. That's what we have to focus on.
Thank you again for being here. My question is, although the legislature passed that outlawing the stuff, they have no teeth to it. There are still school districts in the state of Texas that are heavily promoting that and teaching that because there's no accountability in the bills that were passed. We need to have accountability and consequences of that happening in our school districts. I mean, hard consequences. People getting fired, whatever you have to do. And that bills did not do that. They did not go far enough. And we need to get bills that are, and the policies that you guys are going to implement need to support that too.
Well, and that's why it comes back at the local level. We're at the local level right now, grassroots. That's why you need a strong school board. You need candidate board members who are focused on what the students need in order to be successful and to avoid being distracted and pulled away into these other areas that are not important. They're not important, they don't lead to education of the students, and the students are worse off, and we as a society are worse off because of it. So that's why you need a good, strong school board and school board members that have a philosophy of educating your kids with the basics that they need to know. That's where it comes into. I hear your point, but that's where it comes into at the school board level.
Yes, this may be a little bit of a naive question. I don't come from a school background other than my own education. How can you show as the administration and as a school board member that you support the teachers? I have a friend that recently retired from Cy-Fair ISD, and one of the reasons was she did not feel supported by the principal. She'd been working under her for at least 10 years. And she had two friends that were at that school that retired the year before for the same reason. And I'm anticipating more of this as we have such different values within the community that might play a role. And we need good, honest, hardworking teachers that care. So we don't want them to feel like, I'm just getting in trouble with this principal and I'm not being respected, I'm leaving, you know.
Good point. School board members, one of their responsibilities is to ensure or help to ensure we have adequate resources. The resources include compensation, benefits, pay, that kind of thing. But you need a school board who's got a superintendent there who you bring these issues to regarding what you just said here. That superintendent through his staff, should address those issues or those working conditions, compensation, you name it, related to the teachers. That's his job. That's where he's getting paid. And so, you know, I remember when I served on the school board, we highly valued our teachers because we know the job that they do, and for what we have to accomplish with our students, we need them. We need them to come in and have good working conditions, be paid a decent wage, that type of thing, so that they can come in and feel valued and that they can do what they need to do with our students. So we promoted that as a board. I must say, the board was behind it 100%. I haven't seen a school board really that this is not. We need good teachers, we need good sound teachers, because in order for me to help accomplish what I want to do, I need teachers. I need teachers who are committed, teachers who feel valued, people to pay them a decent wage, make sure their working conditions are solid and that they're pleased with them. We need that in the schools, and that's something that I will advocate for as a board member with the superintendent, that he makes that happen. Yes.
One of my chief gripes about school board meetings is the 2 hours that's wasted while the trustees do their 20-minute rah-rah speeches. I think that we should hear from the parents first and then listen to the trustees later. Also, it's very rude to go into executive session when there are people there waiting to speak to you about what you're gonna go in executive session about.
I agree, and I was very disappointed to hear that the current school board had changed that process, because we always valued the community patrons who would come in and speak. That will change. We're gonna change that in a hurry. Community members will go up front as they should. They will be time limited. I mean, we're not gonna be there all night. We're gonna limit whatever the school board members gotta say, because a lot of times it's not necessary anyway. And so we had a section for that, but a school board member would just say, most of them had hardly anything to say, or they would just say, I went and visited X school and I visited whatever. Very short. I see what you're saying, and it wastes a lot of time, and we don't need to do that.
So, in your remarks, you mentioned DEI, CRT, and transgender. There's a lot of other things we've been complaining about and try to address in the legislature. A lot of these things were unknown to parents, I think, before COVID hit. And I guess there was monitoring in school classrooms during COVID. I don't really know for sure, but is that part of the school program these days? Is there monitoring in the classrooms that parents can understand what is happening in the classrooms, that their children aren't being intimidated or politically intimidated or groomed or monitored, all that sort of stuff?
Good question. I remember when I served on the board, we encouraged parents to be involved with their kids, their students, to the point where, we would invite parents to come in and, they gave notice to the principal, they wanted to come in and sit in on a class, just to sit in the back of the class and observe a class. We did that with parents. We invited that, we supported that. And it was a good environment. The parents could come in. I did it myself as a parent. Go and sit in the back of a class, just observe. Don't not get involved with the plan. Just observe what was being taught to my child. And we need to get back to something like that, where parents don't feel that they're being pushed out and shoved out, but they're being invited in and encouraged to be able to see for themselves what's going on. As long, we don't want parents coming in and disrupting anything. We just want them, if they want to come in sometime and observe a class, get the principal and his staff to approve that, then that should happen. And so that parents can feel comfortable that their kids are being taught what it is they're supposed to be taught. And they're not going off into these other areas and tangents and all of that kind of stuff. So we need to bring parents back in. My mantra will be to have the superintendent have his school staffs reach out to their local communities of parents and come up with ways to bring parents into the school, volunteer into the school. We had parents volunteering in the schools. And they had days where the parents would come in and interact with the teachers and different little socials and things like that, so that they could develop relationships that were healthy for both the student and the parents and the teacher. Because a lot of teachers like that. I didn't have any complaints when I was on the board from teachers that did not approve and didn't like that type of interaction. We need to get back to some of that. Right now, I see people are pushing parents out and don't want parents to be involved. And I think that that's part of the problems that I see, because you need parents involved with their kids. They're gonna want to be the one to tell little Johnny to cut the TV off at night and get his homework. They're gonna be the ones to chastise little Johnny about his behavior in the class. They're gonna be the one, and you're expecting that as a teacher, as a school district. So we want parents involved in the school, and we should come up with a way that we bring that involvement back. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Mr. Edwards, when you served on the school board before, are there any accomplishments that you made before that are still, that Cy-Fair is still enjoying today?
Well, when I was served on the board, we were very focused on the academic preparation of our students. We took it very, very seriously. When we would have our retreats, that would be high on the agenda to talk about for all of our schools in the district. We knew where they were academically with their students, and we talked about those things. And as a result, our test scores for all of our kids were raised, all of them. We had all the subgroups, because we had to look at that, the state requires it and what have you. All of our kids, our whites, our blacks, our Hispanics, they were all doing well academically, which is what we should focus on. Because if they're doing well academically, that means they're gonna become productive, contributing members of society. And I think somewhere along the line, that's gotten lost in this mix-up of all the other stuff that's going on.
Can I help you with your accomplishment? I forgot to bring this up.
George, she threw you a softball.
I go.
You missed it.
All right, who took the vote to put an end to year-round school, so now our property values are now high?
Oh, when I went on, that was a period when this school district was in year-round, and I don't know how many of you remember that. But it was a very intense period for the community in general. And the community took action. They elected me to the school board, and we looked at the financial data related to year-round schooling versus traditional schooling. And we determined that the finances looked better on a traditional school setting, and plus the community would be a lot better, would be more peaceful. And so I asked that we vote to eliminate year-round schooling. And the board, a majority of the board, went along with that vote, and we now have traditional schooling in Cy-Fair again. And it has worked very well since that time. That was a long time ago, so yes.
So, getting back.
Share the mic, please.
I've got 3 questions, but they're all kind of wrapped together. You keep bringing up about superintendents. And we know that the superintendent really is the one who has to execute your policies from the school board. A lot of people, and I still get that confused a lot of times. And we think that you can go out to a school as a school board member and say, okay, principal, you need to do this, but you don't. So how are you going to hold that superintendent accountable to ensure that the policies that the board wants to put in place are adhered to?
Good question. The superintendent is subject to an annual evaluation on his job. The board gets together and come up with a list of goals and objectives that they want him to meet during that annual period. He is held accountable to those goals. We do an evaluation in executive session with him at the end of every year, and that's how we hold him accountable.
Do you do anything like on a monthly or a quarterly
Yes,
basis to
yes,
ensure, because
yeah,
things
yeah.
like that can't go, I'm
No,
sorry,
I
for an
agree,
entire year?
I agree. Well, he knows what his goals are, first of all. And he's not, if we see as board members that he's veering from those goals and objectives that we've set for him, then, we get reports from him every month about what's happening academically in the schools, what's happening operationally in the schools, all of those things. We get those monthly reports, and if we see something going astray or not in line with what the goals that we set for, then we can hold them accountable anytime.
Okay, as far as though violations of policies, and specifically, let me give you one example, whereby if a member of the public brings forward to the school board and members that the parents have not been notified or not getting the opportunity to be notified that they can either opt in or out of particular health sex ed classes, SHAC, then they continue to go against SBOE, State Board of Education rules and TEA rules in doing that. How will you ensure that he is going to adhere to those policies?
Good question. If parents feel that they're not, if they're not being treated right in terms of the opt-in and opt-out, and that's being violated at the school level, and they bring it to, they're allowed to bring it to any level of the, they can bring it to the attention of the principal. First of all, we like to have things solved at the school level, first of all.
Absolutely.
And bring it to the principal's attention. And if the principal doesn't take action to resolve that matter, then they need to bring it up to the administration level. And they can bring it directly to the board if they want, or they can bring it to the superintendent. But and they can copy the board on it. We will know, and then the superintendent is gonna have to report to the board as to what occurred relating to that particular issue and whether or not that parent issue was resolved.
And I got you, because I know that is kind of the reporting process, and you wanted to go through the school and through administration and give them an opportunity. However, if in the instance that the board is notified, was my question, how are you going to ensure that? And it sounds like you are going to then make sure that is followed up on.
Yes, you're gonna ask the question. Board members' responsibility is to work with that superintendent to make certain that its policies, its vision is being carried out. And if a parent in the community is upset about something and it hasn't gotten resolved at the school level for whatever reason, and it bubbles up to the superintendent and the board level, then the board member has a responsibility to follow with the superintendent and to see what happened here and make sure this item gets resolved.
I have
Oh.
2 more questions.
You can get his card and have a meeting
Yeah.
with him.
One last one, and then I'll let somebody else go. Because it's along the same line, and it's about policy. And we know that the school boards are involved with TASB, a lot of them. So what is your view on how that TASB would influence your school board's decisions?
Good question. I remember when I served on the board, we were a part of TASB, but we were part of it. TASB, we used TASB at that time to extract additional funding for fast growth school district, which Cy-Fair was at that time. And so we utilized their offices and their lobbying with the legislators to get the additional funding that we needed for the school district. And it worked out fine. Now, I'm hearing, and I haven't been following TAS, but I've heard that they're operating on a different agenda at this point, and they're pushing things that are not correct in my view from what I hear. My position on it, and I've told everyone that I've spoke to, if we're getting a benefit from TASB, if it's a benefit that the school district is getting, maybe we should have some association with them. But if they're pushing an agenda and they're going a path that we don't like, then we need to cut our ties with them. And I have no problem with that, because again, we've got to get back focused on what schools are for. And it's not to push these other agendas that I see and hear going on within the schools. It's to educate our kids on the basics of what they need to know to become productive and contributing members of society. And that's the reading, writing, and math skills. Yes, sir.
Let's go somewhere else. How about, what's your thought on the
I'm
next?
just gonna do a couple more questions, sorry, just so they can hear.
Thought on the next bond election.
Good question. When is the next? Have you heard it? I don't know when the next one.
2 years probably.
Okay. Yeah. I know Cy-Fair has gone through a very large growth spurt because of all the people moving out here, and that's pretty much what precipitates bonds, is the building of more schools. I believe that my view on bonds have always been this: the school district has to earn the trust of the community and be responsive to the community in order for bonds to be successful, and be able to educate the community on why a bond is needed and what it's going to cover, and be very specific about those things so that the community can support it. If they're not specific and they don't educate the community on why bonds are needed, then in a lot of instances, the bonds don't pass. But I will say, in this community, in Cy-Fair ISD, we've been fortunate. Our community has generally supported bond issues in Cy-Fair because they've seen the growth and they've gone through a process of trying to educate the community on what the reasoning for the bonds and that type of thing. I don't believe in unnecessarily doing things, but based on the growth and what have you that we have and that we continue to have in a lot of ways, because you go out, drive out 290, you can see, schools are gonna be necessary. And so, but my objective is this: if we get our school district refocused on what it's supposed to do, and the community and the parents see that the district is doing what it's supposed to do and staying focused on what it's supposed to do, I don't generally think the community will reject a bond issue from the district, as long as they feel that they're getting a value from it in terms of the students getting the education that they desire, that they need. Then I think the community is generally supportive of bond issues. And that's just been my view in Cy-Fair. Yes.
Wait, there's two more questions, so Robert and Howard.
I was gonna follow up on the bond. That's okay.
Yeah.
So, the amount of bond, is that generated from the school board?
They usually have a bond committee that's formed, and that bond committee studies the needs of the district, and it goes over a certain period of time, 6 months, sometimes it's a year. They'll study the needs of the community, of the school district. And they will bring a report back to the board on what those needs are and the price that's attached to those needs in terms of buildings and upgrades and all that kind of stuff. The board will review that report from the committee, because the committee will actually do a formal presentation. The board will review that report and that presentation, and they will decide on whether or not to set a bond for vote by the community. The board sets the date of the bond election for the community to vote. But that's basically what that process is. Like I said, in Cy-Fair, I have not seen where, I've seen where some issues, because the board has the authority to take out certain things within the bond proposal. They have that authority, and they say, well, we don't want to need to do this at this point in time, or we'll delay this. And so they can decrease that bond amount that the committee recommends based on what the growth figures are that they're presented with. So, but they set the date, that the board sets the date on which the bond election is held within the community. Yes.
So, just to get back to the discipline again.
Sure.
My sister was an in-school suspension monitor in Dallas, and I used to hear these stories. It's the same kids coming back all the time. It doesn't seem to make any difference. And so I guess my question is, are there any innovative new approaches to establishing discipline in the school? I know I heard one suggestion by Michael Berry, who said, well, look, what if a kid got into trouble and the parent was asked or required to come sit in school and watch what that kid did to disrupt the school? The parent may not know if the kid is having discipline problems, and if the parent is involved, and perhaps having the parent sit there and embarrass the kid with the parent sitting in the back of the school would make a difference, but it just sounded like an interesting approach to me.
It's a good point. Like I say, we've got to get the parents back into the schools. We need them to handle their kids from a certain point of view. I mean, our teachers need to be able to teach in a non-disruptive environment and do what they do, but our parents need to be able to reinforce with that child at home his behavior or the lessons planned or the lessons that have been given by the teachers. They have homework, make sure that homework is done. And so the parents are very helpful. We found them to be very helpful with their students. And but the parents have that role. They have that role. And if in the teacher, and that's one of the things about relationship. That's one of the reasons why we would have also, the time where, and they may still have it, where the teachers and the parents meet each other and sit down and talk and about the child. And the teacher said, well, Johnny is acting up here or doing this and whatever. That parent should be able to get that type of information and be able to go back and chastise that child if he needs to, and to get his behavior in standard. And we've had those conversations with our own kids. And so that's one of the reasons why I would go just periodically, just take off some time from work at the time and just go and sit in on class or two and just sit in the back, just to observe them. Because I want to send a message to my child that he's being watched. And he better not act up. So, I mean, there are ways to, but that was something that was encouraged at one time in Cy-Fair. And, it may not be now, but for whatever reason, but to me it's something that needs to be encouraged again. Let parents come back in so that they can have a hand on their child and helping them in their development. We need to get the churches back in. you know, some churches are very close to schools. Why not have the churches adopt some of the schools that they're close to, provide some mentors or whatever is needed. Businesses, let's get some of the businesses involved in some of the activities. I just think that we've gotten away from some basic things that were very helpful in the development of students. And we've kind of become a fortress unto ourselves, and I don't think that that's a very healthy thing for the kids.
Yeah, I wanna thank, I mean, if you guys wanna talk to George, I know he's very amiable to meet or coffee. You know, you got more details that's going on in the school district you're concerned about, just reach out to George. He will make time. So I don't think he was expecting to have all the time tonight. So, you know, thank you, George, for the additional questions and the time for questions. He'll be here at the next meeting. He'll be here again. We're going to try to get all the candidates out again. We're going to transition next topic. Did you want to ask another question?
What position is he running for?
I don't know if they know yet.
We haven't decided yet. We're having a meeting tomorrow among the other potential candidates to decide what position we'll end up with. At this point, it's up in the air.
And I would say with that too, you guys, one thing to think about is that although they are 4 positions, right, they're at large, right? So we don't know where the opposition's gonna line up yet either, right? So the candidates wanna get the best matchup. So that'll impact how they initially register, but the law does allow you to change position. You got 4 weeks, so if you sign up in position 1 now, 2 or 3 people come in and say, well, yeah, maybe that's not the race I want to run. You know, so you can't switch it.
But the people that are on there now are not expecting them to run again except for Julie, right?
Well, yeah, but you